Hello, everybody. So thank you for being there. As I told before the microphone started, I am really surprised to see so many people for a talk about htmx and web components. And I asked, how many here has already used or read something about htmx? Wow, I didn't expect that. And about web components? Not bad, not bad. So I hope you are going to like what are you going to see. Let's begin by introducing myself. I am Horacio Gonzalez. As you can maybe hear if you concentrate yourself, I am a Spaniard who has been living in France for over 25 years. My accent combines the worst traits of both Spanish and French accent. Sorry about that, people. I am VP of Developer Relations at Clever Cloud, a French cloud provider and European cloud provider. We have a booth in the sponsor area, so please come after the talk and we will talk and you will get some swag. But let's begin with the talk. htmx. What's that? Well, if I had to resume that in one phrase, it will be, it's like an extension of plain old HTML that allows you to use things in the same way that the old HTML, but to do things that you cannot do with the old language. Let me explain. Maybe you have asked yourself why we have so many arbitrary limitations on HTML. For example, why the only elements who can do some HTTP requests are A and form. Why they can only send, get, and post methods. What about delete? What about put? Why they force a full page reload? What about events? Why are so many arbitrary limits? Because it was made to do some library things. Internet, the web at the beginning was a big library. So the language, it wasn't meant to be used as we use it now. htmx tries to solve that by extending HTML capacities. Any element can do AJAX request. Any element can do AJAX request that get a response that doesn't force a full page reload. It can make reload only a part of a page. You can handle easily CSS transition. You can work with WebSocket in a normal way. You can process server-sent events. You can do things that in normal 2025 application are normal without having to use some nasty-looking JavaScript to do that, all using declarative HTML-like attributes. So what's the point? Why we would like to do that? Well, as you can see, I begin to get old. Let's go back to a time where dinosaurs were still in Earth. I was young. I coded in struts with Java. Yeah, some of you too. Do you remember MVC model? Hey, model view controller. Page-by-page navigation, the golden age of original frameworks, Struts, Sinatra Play, Django, Rails, Grails. They all were frameworks oriented page-by-page navigation of HTML views. And they worked very well. But something happened by 25, something called AJAX. The idea was elements could do arbitrary requests to server, get response, and by using some mix of JavaScript or some other nasty things in all Internet Explorer, they could update not the whole page, but only a part of the page. Well, it was the beginning of many things, especially when some libraries like jQuery began to get all the light. Hey, jQuery, who here used jQuery to develop web? Hey, I remember that dollar everything. We shift from the classical page-by-page navigation to single-page applications. And okay, they are really nice. You can do pretty complex things with single-page application, especially if you begin to add some complexity layers. You have Angular, you have React, you have Vue, you have a ton of framework. I think since the beginning of this talk, there is already a new framework who has arrived, and by the end, there will be 3 or 4. But it seems that everybody likes that. Well, I think it isn't true. Many developers begin to think that web development in 2025 is a hell of complexity. Why? Because everybody has changed to the idea of backends only generate a REST API with JSON data. So we are completely separating the data part, the backend, with the presentation part. We have super new functionality, got a lot of features, but we don't have neither the simplicity nor the semantics. And for me, it is overkill for many applications. You don't need that every part, every small interactivity part in a website, you don't need that to be a single-page application. I would like to have only some interaction, some interactive part in an all-static page. That's the idea of htmx. By extending the HTML language, we can have a way to do simple things in a semantic, declarative way. Okay, too much theory. Yeah, wait minutes. You need some demo. I have prepared a big GitHub repository with all the code I am going to show, because I also give this talk as a 3-hour lab, so I am not going to stop all the details of the code. You will have in the repository all the detailed instructions, so please, I will show this slide later if you want to get it later. So, that is htmx. I have an hx post, an attribute clicked, and a target. That means that my button, when clicked, it will post to the backend at clicked, and the result will be used to modify the content of a status here. And I think we can begin to do some coding because it is fun and all that. So I have here my htmx example. The first one, as we have seen, I am going to start my server and hoping that everything runs right. So, local host 8080, yes. And we need some development tools, and we are well for all the demo. So I click in the button. As I told you, it's only some hx attributes. I click on it, and it generated a post to click it, and the result, I get an HTML fragment as response, and I replace the status div with the content of the response. So I can replace an arbitrary part of my page. Let's look at the second example. I am trying to make it bigger for you people. So I have 4 buttons. The first one is going to do a get, the second a post, put a delete. And they are going to put the response in the status. Well, get post put delete. I have generated the 4 methods, and I have changed the answer, all in a declarative way. I have buttons get. The first one, I am going to do a get, and it is the normal behavior. If I click, the message will be replaced. I am going to put the answer by default in the same element. Nice. Here, in the second, I am going to swap. That means I am going to replace the whole element by the response. In the third, I am going to simply ignore the response. I am going to do nothing with it. And with the end, when the response arrives, I am going to delete the element. I am not going to replace anything or to introduce anything. So I can choose the kind of behavior I can do with the response. First one, replace it. Second one, I replace the whole button. Third one, nothing. And the last one, it disappears. And I have sent my request to the same endpoint with different results. I can also use other method that click. I can listen to any arbitrary event. I mean, I can use the natural trigger. It means click. On this one, I can trigger on mouse over, or I can trigger on mouse center, or on mouse leaf. Let's try to look at that. For the first one, a click. Click. The second one, it is sent when I put the mouse over it, mouse over. The third one, only when the mouse enter. And the last one, when the mouse leaves. So I could do that with any other HTML event that I can imagine. So now I am able to do all the requests in whatever event I want to send arbitrary REST request to any endpoint and do whatever I want with the response. It was 80% of things I wanted to use with jQuery 20 years ago. I can also send requests every 5 seconds, for example. I can trigger request when I do some key combination that I click and control key. I can do it with click and control key, but only the first time. There is a whole declarative semantics that allows you to do whatever you want with your user interface, allowing you to navigate your user interface using only keys, shortcuts, or whatever you want. So for example, this one doesn't send anything unless I do control. Sorry, in a Mac it doesn't work because I don't have the control key, but in a Windows, I can change that to use command. I had always did my presentation on Linux and Mac. It helps my shortcut, and this one, it isn't going to work with the same thing, but you can try it by yourself. And I can even do things that I always wanted to do in an easy way, like a spinner for the slow request. How I do my spinner? Well, in this panel, I have a div status. Here I am putting an ASICS indicator. That means that I am sending the information of if I am waiting for a response or if the response is arriving, I am sending it directly to indicator. And with CSS, I am saying, hey, when there is the html indicator in an item, I show it. And if it isn't the indicator, I hide it. So while the request is in progress, I show my spinner, and when the response arrives, my spinner is automatically hidden. All without writing no explicit JavaScript. Yeah, I think we are going well in my demos. You can also do many more things with plain old htmx. There are many things for WebSockets, for example, but if you have some limits, you can extend them because there are a lot of extensions to htmx, and you can write your own extension to encapsulate the behavior you want. That means you can create very complex apps with a declarative syntax, and the extensions are rather complex. For example, the extension for WebSocket that provides a fully bidirectional communication in a simple way without having to declare anything to open your or to deal with your WebSocket connection, and when you receive message, do things. Let's do something a bit more complex. Let's do a full to-do list. You are going to see it is easier than it seems. Where is my, up, close all. To-do example. Well, in to-do list, we begin with the basic implementation of my to-do list, plain old HTML. We have a container to put the elements of the list. We have a form. And we have, of course, some nice CSS to make that a little more ugly. Static. I can try to add anything. It isn't going to do anything. Step 2. I am simply adding the htmx dependency. Now, in my form, I am going to post to this address on submit. And the result, I am going to put it in my list container. It isn't a to-do list yet. It's a list of things. I have a problem. If I reload, I lose everything, and then everything appears when I add a thing. But no bad. We have begun to have some functionality. Now we aren't recovering the whole list. We are simply adding to the precedent elements. So if I do A, and let's do at the console, I recovered a list item. I do B, I recover a list item. And I am putting everything in the list. To do that, I use the before-end swap mode. That means that new elements, I am going to put them just before the end of the target to-do list element. That means that when I reload, I don't show anything. At my real list at the server side had lots of elements, but I am only saying the one I am adding. But we are advancing. So before end, you can also put it at the beginning of an element and a lot of other things. Okay. Now we can preload. You see, we recover all. How I do the preload? I am using here the trigger load. At the loading of the element, I want to send a get to this server root that it is going to send me the word list. So you can initialize whatever you want in your user interface by using the load trigger. And here I add another one. Well, we are almost there. In order to get a real to-do list, maybe I need to be able to edit elements. Now look at the same list. Here, when I get an element, I am getting only a list item. What I am doing now on server side is going to remind you to plain old JSP, for example, or PHP when you send back HTML fragments. Look at that. Hey, now every element has an edit and delete. I am going to restart the server in order to show with an empty data set. It's going to look better. A, B, A, B, C. My server is not sending JSON. It's sending HTML fragments. If I go server side, for example, with a second server index, I have all the roots for all the samples at the same point. And here we have, I do like we did all 20 years ago. We generated HTML fragments. It is a silly idea. Some people told me, we have a nice JSON format. Why don't you use that? Well, because for many applications, sending JSON means you are putting all the complexity on the client side. Sometimes you want to send plain old HTML that client can integrate everywhere. You aren't asking the client to create a whole logic for the view. You are sending views. You are doing MVC again. We will talk about that later. And so, as I am sending the two buttons, every button can generate an action. For example, delete. So now I can delete this one, and I can add another, and I can edit it. And all with the same logic. My main application has no JavaScript. Okay, I guess that as usual you have all the examples and all the explanation in the same page. I know what some of you are thinking. It seems that going back to another time, why it is useful. It is useful because many things doesn't deserve to be a full application. Let's talk about a documentation page. Let's talk about a blog. Let's talk about a wiki or whatever thing you use now to replace wikis. In this kind of a static setup, you could want to have some interactivity, a search function, some way of personalization, some interactive demo. Sometimes you will have 2 or 3 of that in the page. You aren't created single page application for each one. You are simply putting some HTML, some attributes, and sending back the good response that integrates in the static side. So for me, in many cases, there are a lot of middle ground between full static site and full dynamic single page application. And if you are in this middle ground, using something like htmx can make things easier, faster, and especially can make things way more simple if you don't have a full JavaScript developer at hand. Almost any backend developer knows enough HTML to be able to understand that and can prepare this kind of mini interactive application in a few moments without having to do all the setup of a full React application. Okay? That was the first part. We still have time, so who here told me that has already used web components? That's sad, so few people. Who here has heard about web components a bit more? Well, let's go for the 3 minutes context. Web components are a W3C standard. They are a web standard. They are part of the web. That means that all browsers, in order to be browsers, implement this standard. You have it in your phone, you have it in your computer, you have it in any normal internet browser you use. They are part of the platform. They allow you to create your own HTML tags and associate a look and behavior to that tag. You can create your own semantic new elements, and they are going to be fully interoperable. That means that you can have several web components in your page, created the different way using different helper libraries or no libraries. You can have a framework, you can have static pages, and everything is going to work together because the web components, when you instantiate them for the framework, for the static page, for the other web components, they are like any other HTML tag. There are 3 pillars in the standard: custom elements, shadow DOM, and templates. I am not going to do all the details. The custom elements is the part that allows you to define your own tag. You are using the custom elements defined to define a new tag, my element, and associated an HTML element with the behavior and the look. So after declaring that, you can use your tag, and the browser is going to show the look and the behavior you have defined it there. The shadow DOM allows you to encapsulate the style of the component, because if you are creating a component, you want it to have a style and look and feel particular, and you don't want that look and feel to bleed out of the component. You want to put it only for the component. So you are going to define a hidden space inside the component where the style only affects that space. And the template is where you are defining the look of your component. Retain only the concept. Because in fact, a custom element is like any other HTML element. They have attributes and properties as input. They have methods that can be called, element, dot, and method, and they communicate with the outside by emitting plain old HTML events, standard events, no some React fancy things. Standard web events. You can communicate with them like with any other HTML component. Okay, retain that. You can create custom elements by hand, but it takes some work because the standard is very low level. It is low level because they know that you can create web components in many different ways, so the standard must allow all of them. So you have a lot of helper libraries that help you to create custom elements in a more idiomatic way. There are some libraries that use some Angular-like syntax, others that use some React-like syntax. So any developer can choose their favorite one. One of the best for me, my opinion, is Lit. Lit is a library made by the teams of Google that is the spiritual heir of the first web component library, Polymer. It is really fast, simple, and it is really easy to understand. That's a Lit element web component. So I am importing Lit element and a helper HTML function. I am declaring an element that stands Lit element. I am defining the properties of the element. I have a constructor when I initialize the properties. So my element is going to expose the property name, the attribute name. And at the initialization, the default is going to be world. And then I define the render. The render function will be called every time the property changes, and only then. So you can going to have a very efficient rendering that only changes the part of the DOM tree that has changed, not the whole DOM tree of the component. It is lightning fast. For that, it uses this helper function. We are going to say that. So my element is going to do hello and the value of name. And if the value of name changes, the look will be changed. I think that deserves a small, fast example. So I am going back to my. So here you have all the list, all the examples. And here I import my element, and I am going to use custom greeting, the tag I have declared for my element. And I am setting a name, gfocus 2025. So it is going to render the element, hello, gfocus 2025. And if I change that, it renders again, but only the part that changed. And that part who has changed, the rendering result is inside the shadow root. As I told you, you use something called shadow DOM in web components, so the implementation of the look and feel is hidden, but you can open it and see that before we have, as you saw, we had a p hello and the name of the property exclamation, but here we have the elements by separate. So when I change the content, only this element is going to change. It's going to create a very fast rendering. Okay? That's Lit. Why it is interesting? Because with Lit, let me look at my timer. I am in time. Let's go back to the slideshow. Because Lit allows you to create web components really quickly in an efficient way, and components that are performant. It uses the HTML helper function. It is called a tag template. It's something introduced in JavaScript almost 10 years ago. Many people still don't know that because the concept is interesting. I think you know all the string with backquote in JavaScript. It is used to do multi-line scripts when you can interpolate things, interpolate variables. But there is a part of the syntax of the backquoted strings that many people doesn't know. You can put a function before. If you put the function name before the string, you are telling for the interpolation, instead of using the normal interpolation, we are going to call a helper function. And this helper function, it is going to receive all the tokens we do, like for artificial intelligence LLM, we are tokenizing the string. It is going to receive all the tokens of my string and doing whatever we want to do with all the tokens. So the idea of the HTML function, it is a function that when I gave this string, it is going to h1. I am going to create an h1 HTML element. And I am going to put this data inside. Now I'm going to create a P element, and I'm going to put that inside. And the result will be a fully rendered HTML element. Here, I am not creating a string. I am creating directly an HTML object in JavaScript. That's the idea. So if some of you have already do some front-end development in the last years, maybe you are going to tell me, yeah, it is a bit like GS6. Well, not GS6. It doesn't make sense from a language point of view. It isn't JavaScript. It isn't legal JavaScript. It isn't legal HTML. It's some unholy hybrid of both of them. Here we have something that it is fully legal JavaScript and generates fully legal HTML. So we are going to use standards. And that's very important. We don't need some fancy IDE extension in order to do that. It is only a standard JavaScript. So again, let's do a demo. This one, we have already done it. I am going to do now this small counter. Let's do something interactive. I need 3 minutes maybe. Let's do it. And lit examples. I am creating, let's forget the CSS. Nobody wants to see CSS in a presentation. I am creating a new element called my lit counter. I define a property, a number counter. I initialize the counter to 0. Nice. In my rendering, I am going to add an icon. I am going to get an image with a logo, the lit logo. And I am going to say, hey, this image, this icon, it is going to listen to the click event. And when the click events arrive, we are going to call this increment function that it is going to increase counter, and it is going to send an event to the outside. Because I told you the best way to send information outside a web component is by sending an event. Okay, nice. We are sending an event increase, and we are increasing the counter. And we are displaying the value of counter. Well, let's go back to my silly example. And here we have the look the component, and every time I click, I do my counter, I dispatch my event. From a HTML point of view, it is an empty element where all the behavior and the look is encapsulated inside. Okay? Thank you very much, 10 minutes. That's HTML. Now we arrive to the point I wanted to do. I wanted to do 2 points. htmx is a nice technology if you want to create some interactive part in plain old static page. 2, if you use htmx and web components, for example with Lit, but with any other, you have a combo that allows you to create very complex things in an easy way using only standards. So it is going to work in a plain old page. It is going to work if you are combining that with any framework standard application, and you are going to have something really powerful. The idea is you use htmx for the structure, for the main behavior. So I click here, and I am going to display some result there. And you are going to use lit to encapsulate the logic. For example, let's say I want to do a dashboard showing the weather in several cities. I want to allow my users to type the city, and I want to show the weather in that city. Second city, I have a second widget with the weather, and I can customize my page with a lot of cities and the current weather in those cities. The ideal idea to do that, it isn't create a single page application. You can simply do a standard HTML form with some htmx tags. In order to, every time a new one is added, we are going to add to a list a new HTML fragment, the new widget. And this widget, instead of trying to do it with HTML and CSS, like it is an encapsulated widget, we can simply send a custom element that it is going to hide inside all the logic to display the widget. So instead of an application, you have one custom element and one htmx structure. And I have less than 5 minutes to show you that. So let me show you my weather dashboard example. As I told you, the main one is really simple, a form. This form, it is going to put something in the weather list, and instead of replacing, we are going to append at the end of the content of weather list. I am going to append the result of the location. So I am going to, as a form, I am going to say Stockholm. It is going to send a request. It is going to get me a widget that I will put at the end of my list. Then Madrid, same thing. OK, nice. And I also have completely separated a weather widget. This weather widget is going to have 4 properties: name, latitude, longitude, and weather data. Name, the name of the city. Latitude and longitude, the server is going to be responsible to setting that in the component. And weather data, well, for the weather data, we are going to use OpenMeteo, a fully open and free meteo database. That's the only logic I really need. Is, of course, I love emoji. So the API is going to tell me you have clear sky, but I prefer to put some emoji. But that's only for the fun. It's the biggest part of my code. So my weather, it is going to show the the location, it is going to show the temperature, the emoji with some tooltip for people who don't like emojis, and the wind speed. Completely encapsulated. So on the server side, and with that, I will be almost done. At the end, please. At the end, please. I am going to preload with 3 cities because I want to have some data at the beginning. Brest because I live there, Stockholm because it is here, and Madrid because I was born there. But the idea is when I add a new location, I am going to try to get the city and eventually the country, and I am going to put that in a function that calls another API, a geocoding API, also from OpenMeteo, that get from a city and a country the weather data. Okay. Demo. Weather dashboard. They are lucky. And the tooltip. So I can add or New York, ale. I have no API. Why? Location pending. API is slow. Why do you don't want to answer me, silly API? You have answered the first one. Well, I have a small error anything, but the idea is when I add something, I am going to send a request to this backend when I have, I don't know why, some error. I think I understand why. I think I forgot. I have deleted a line. Silly Horacio. Well, let's going to try to fix that in life. Response send. City, country, maybe. Hey! Don't worry, I have still 2 minutes, I can do it. The city and the country. Yeah, but I didn't need, normally, if it is only one city, it can down it. Don't. But what I am doing, the location. So, wait a second. Let's do some, hey, I really like that. Console.log. Yeah, I think I have an await problem. Thank you very much. Yeah, like I had here, I really dislike JavaScript asynchronous hell. Let's try that. And if it works, I am going to end with a bang. And if not, I am going to send you to the... Yes! So, I hope with that, I have got you interested in looking at htmx and maybe to web components. If you try, please send me a message, tell me how it worked, and if you have any questions, I think we have no time, so I will be outside. Just now, thank you very, very, very much, and please rate my talk, of course, because here you have, if you want to leave your rate, Thank you very much